Ladies and gentlemen, shall we start the evening? Now, I've been asked to introduce our speaker, well, who needs no introduction, actually. Nicolas Revire is a senior research fellow at the Chicago Art Institute. But before that, he was lecturing at Thammasat University, as you know, and edited two wonderful books. And Decoding Southeast Asian Art has just been reviewed in the latest Journal of the Science Society 2 years after it came out. It's normal practice. Since Nicolas is actually at the Chicago Art Institute, it's most apt that he should be talking to us about the reuniting the Lintel and the Pilaster at the Prasat Phanom Rung. So I will not keep you waiting. And Nicolas, you have the floor. Thank you.
Very good evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you, Dr. Ted, for the introduction. So it's my great pleasure. We just arrived this morning from Istanbul. So it's been a long, long day in transit. And I didn't bring this pilaster with me. As you will uncover, the pilaster is still in Chicago at the moment, sitting in storage and waiting for final decisions on scheduling on the return. But more on that later. So, for those who do not know, I have been based in Chicago since January 23, so it's been nearly 2 years now. And my mission is there to study and research the collection of Southeast Asian art, and by that mainly mainland Southeast Asia, so Thai, Khmer, Vietnamese, and so on. Objects which are exhibited or in storage, but part of the, Alsdorf Gallery. So this is a view of the Alsdorf Gallery at the Art Institute of Chicago, for those of you who know. And here, this is a picture from a few years ago, but here on view you see on the wall the pilaster which I'm going to talk about today. And part of my mission while doing this research is to look at what we call, in jargon, provenance research. So provenance, in a very narrow museum definition, it refers to the history of ownership. So looking at where these objects, from which collectors, which collections these pieces came from. But for me, as from someone from the field who spent like 20 years in Thailand before going to work in the museum, I really have a very different approach to provenance. To me, it really is coming from, so it really is, as it should be, it's a French word, right? The site of origin, okay? The place of origin. So it's not, of course, always possible to pinpoint exactly where the object may come from, especially when we talk about sculptures, bronze images which are very easily movable, okay? You may never know exactly where these objects were found, okay, or produced, but you can get an idea, of course, of at least narrowing down the region and the context, okay? But for some objects, such as this one, when we're talking about architectural fragment, obviously it has to come from somewhere, right? So it may be possible to find exactly the place where it was once at the time. So when I arrived in Chicago early 2023, I started to overlook at the entire collection of some 200 plus objects in my area and doing some archival research. And for some of you may remember, I came about a year ago, December 23, here in Thailand to conduct some field work. Okay, and here I am again. So very early, as soon as I arrived in Chicago, I had an interest for this pilaster, which was on view when I came in, and asking the question, where this is coming from? Okay, so this is the tombstone which was given when I arrived. So the object was labeled as being Cambodian from the Angkor period, 11th century. Okay, with an accession number. So in America, in U.S. Museum, you have accession numbers, which reflects year 2017 the date of acquisitions, the formal acquisitions from the museum. So this object formally came in the possession of the museum in 2017. That's only a few years ago. But you really have to look beyond that, okay? So after doing due diligence and research, I found out that this object actually was on loan in our collection. So not formally part of the permanent collection, but as a loan, a long-term loan, since 1966. And it's been published a couple of times and exhibited as well at the time. And again, in this catalog, for instance, again, it was labeled as being Cambodian. So this is an early publication from 1965, actually, December 65, but I presume it is backdated, and the catalog actually was published in early 66 from Jerome Eisenberg, Royal Athena Gallery. So this is the dealer gallery based in New York City, who published it first. And then on long term, it was purchased by the Alsdorf Foundation. For those who don't know, James Alsdorf was one of the richest guys around in Chicago at the time, and he collected art, especially from the areas of Asia, Southeast Asia, and a lot of his collection ended up at the Art Institute of Chicago. So this object included. James Alsdorf passed away in 1990, and then the collection went on to his wife, Marilyn, who then eventually gave it to us formally in 2017. So you can see the long journey. So up until last year, at least, this object was believed as coming from Angkor, and more precisely, possibly the Bapuan temple in Angkor, okay, 11th century temple. And the reason for that is because at the Bapuan, there are some nice reliefs of the life of Krishna. Krishna being the avatar of Vishnu, so which is the topic that is depicted on the pilaster. Okay. Now, of course, that is not sufficient evidence to claim that this object came from the Bapuan, because you have representations of Krishna in many other Khmer temples, not only in Angkor, but also in Khmer temples in Thailand. Look at Pimai, look at Phanom Rung. Okay. So I had a hunch, and I'm saying I've never seen anything like this in Angkor, okay? But it reminds me of something I have seen in northeast Thailand. I was thinking of some pilaster base in Pimai, so that was in the back of my mind. And it's only after a while that I realized that where it came from. So earlier this year, in June 2024, you may have heard the news that the Art Institute decided to deaccession, so this is another technical term in museums, to deaccession, to take out from the collection an object that has formerly been accessioned. Okay? So remember, the object has been officially accessioned in 2017, and 8 years later, or 7 years later, the museum decided to deaccession it. Now, there must be a reason for it. Okay? Why? Why would the Art Institute decide to return, to repatriate this fragment of a pilaster to Thailand? So here, I'm here to tell you the story. These are some aid news in Thai newspapers, Bangkok Post, Khao Sot, Matichon, and so on. And of course, social medias, X, Facebook, name it, etc. And it was funny to read sometimes all the comments, people speculating on things that they don't know about. So I had to intervene and give my version of the story. So Phanom Rung, many of you be familiar with the site. You may have visited Phanom Rung, magnificent temple in Buriram province, located right here, not very far from the modern border, of course. So Phanom Rung is a temple on the mountain, an extant volcano. It's dedicated to Shiva, Lord Shiva. Okay, so Shiva temple. But as with many Shiva temples, it is often decorated with Vaishnava iconography. So you find depictions of God Vishnu and his avatars, mostly Krishna and Rama. That's very common. Okay. So I think, so Phanom Rung up until the early 70s was basically a heap of stones, as you can see from these old photographs found in archives. Okay. This is from the year 1930, when a Thai delegation led by Prince Damrong, Ratanupap, went to the site, took photos. Okay, so, and by 1971, the Fine Arts Department, Krom Silapakorn, decided, I think in collaboration with UNESCO at the time, to reconstruct basically the site. The late Pierre Pichard, who was a dear friend here at the same society, of course was a key actor in this reconstruction of Phanom Rung, as well as Pimai. And from these early photographs, sometimes we're lucky to have photographs of reliefs, such as this beautiful Lintel fragment, on which more in a minute. And so I did the research in old photos, books, literatures, and I started with our internal files at the Art Institute to see whatever information we have at the museum about the past transactions and where did these objects come from. And this is the pilaster. This is the fragment of a lintel, which back in the 70s and 80s was part of the collection of the Art Institute. Okay? So when I found this receipt dated 1966, you see here this line referring to the Khmer pilaster relief, this one, which, as I told you, was on loan at the time, came on loan. And right below, you have this crossed information referring to this lintel, a Vishnu lintel, I call it, depicting reclining Vishnu, also labeled originally as being from Cambodia, which of course is wrong, as we know now. And even before I came to work at the Art Institute, I, of course, knew about this Vishnu lintel, as most of you know about the story back in the 80s, okay? That this piece came from Phanom Rung. So when I found these received with the two objects next to each other, I immediately realized the provenance of this object. So I went back to look at my photos of Phanom Rung, and here we go. So both the pilaster, Khmer sandstone pilaster, and the lintel came from the same dealer in New York City, the Royal Athena Galleries on 57th Street, Manhattan. Same year. It was purchased by James Alsdorf from the foundation and then sent on loan to the Art Institute. And a letter dated 1988 by Jerome Elzenberg of the Royal Athena Galleries in New York City confirmed that he bought these objects in Bangkok on January 14, 1966. He gives us the date. He doesn't give us the name of the gallery in Bangkok, but most likely in River City. Okay. So here we are. This is the lintel as it was on view at the Art Institute in the 70s and 80s. This is an earlier photograph of the same lintel dated 1961-62 in situ in Phanom Rung. And this was basically visual evidence for the Thai authorities and the Fine Arts Department to make a claim, as you may remember, in the 80s, to claim for these objects back. When they were reconstructing, renovating Phanom Rung, they say, hey, we are missing this piece. We know it is with you at the Art Institute of Chicago. We want it back, please. Okay? And it was first spotted in Chicago by this publication in 1972. So this is when scholars first realized that this lintel was in the US, okay, published here. And as many of you, Professor Momshao Supat at this school, was a key actor in this. He was one of the persons who identified the object as being at the Art Institute of Chicago for many years, through negotiations, etc., convinced eventually the various parties. But to put things in context, in 1988, it took several months of negotiations. So through different news, especially news media's coverage, both in Thailand and in the US, and it took months and months and months. And there were a lot of discussions around this case and controversy, really. And some people would question, why is it that Thailand, the Kingdom of Thailand, was not part yet, and still is not part yet to date, but I'm hearing that it's changing very soon, of the UNESCO, the famous UNESCO Convention agreement signed in 1970. Okay? Some countries have not signed the convention yet. Okay? It's not compulsory. But I've heard that very soon it will change for Thailand. There were certain allegations by protesters, activists, that the US military back then in the 60s, who were, remember, fighting in Vietnam, and some military station in Thailand, in Northeast Thailand, were involved in the looting of Khmer art in the region. Of course, the US authorities immediately denied that. And there were some Ed News reporting about, okay, so this is the missing piece of the stone jigsaw, the lintel, so-called. waiting for the last piece. This is General Prem, when he was prime minister at the time. There was a discussion about the possibility of exchanging objects. So the Art Institute would agree to return the lintel, but they wanted something in exchange. So there were some negotiations around that. But eventually this was turned out. And I smile at these Ed News waiting for the last piece, but what about here? So we're talking about the lintel here, but look at here. It's very clear. We are missing one piece here. Same door frame structure, the central sanctuary of Phanom Rung. In fact, there are, as we will see, many missing pieces in this story. So in Chicago itself, the Thai community and friends will protest, okay, around. These are archival photos of protesters in front of the Art Institute. And so this took months and months and months. And eventually, the dispute was settled in October 1988. And with the intervention of a philanthropic foundation in the US, we decided to put some money down, because the Art Institute basically would agree to return, but not for free. They wanted compensation. Following a stipulation in a UNESCO convention, Article 7, that the innocent purchaser, being a collector or a museum, had to be compensated. And maybe this is a reason why the Kingdom of Thailand has not signed the UNESCO convention, possibly. So eventually the dispute was settled, and you may also remember the protest song by the rock band Carabao. Chorus was take Michael Jackson back, but give us back the Phra Narai or Vishnu Lintel. The album, the name of the album, the Lintel, Taplang. Okay, so you can find these on YouTube and go back to bring back some old memories of Carabao. And so eventually on November 10, the lintel from the Art Institute was returned to Bangkok, to Thailand. And I believe, I wasn't there yet, but I believe it was a very strong happening, day of celebration. Okay? Even though after the return, there were still some people doubting that the Art Institute had returned the original lintel. Questioning. It is true, if you have looked at the photographs, that, if I go back a little bit, this is a photograph from 1930. Do you see the shape of the lintel? If I'm going forward. Okay. And look at here. It's been damaged. It's been broken down. Okay. So there's some missing parts here, definitely. But not the Art Institute fault. It came to us like it. Okay. So, in fact, there are quite a number of forgeries around, duplicate of the lintel. So this lintel was so famous that it several duplicates were made of it. So this is one example in another private collection in San Francisco. This is another one that I found, also in the US, sold in auction in 1974. You can find it recently, this is last year. I found it, an example, $35,000 US on eBay. I mean, who would buy this? Obviously, this is a fake. I mean, from Angkor Wat. This one, not for sale. I took a picture. I visited a stone workshop in Ayutthaya. I'm forgetting the name of this gentleman. Thai, do you remember the name of this workshop? forgot the name, but he's a famous, and his father was very famous, replicating basically anything you wanted. Look at the picture, oh, you want this? Okay, I'll do it. So this is the lintel in full size. And the lintel has really got into, you know, the imaginaire all over the place. This is a depiction on the wall of this local school in Buriram. Postcards. Speaking of postcard, this is a postcard sent by the former curator of the Art Institute, Jacques Sewell, who visited the site back in 1988 and who have seen the Vishnu lintel looks well in its new setting, which is really the original setting after it was returned. Okay. So, Phanom Rung, we enter from here to the east, you ascend to the mountain, and you enter into the most sacred place, the central sanctuary. Okay? And this is where we are looking at here. So this is a photograph before the return of the fragment that was kept in Chicago. And this is as you may see it now. Okay? So as you can see, it is broken, and we are definitely missing parts here, unfortunately. So, dancing Shiva, reclining Vishnu, no problem. Now, looking at exactly the same door frame, what do we have here? We have these pilasters. Okay? So what is a pilaster in the first place? It is just a decorative element, like a pillar. These pilasters have absolutely no structural function. Okay? They are just here to support, to decorate. Okay? So you have all these scroll works. You have this figure here. This one is missing, as you've seen. Okay? So what we have here? Well, I found an old photograph of this in situ in Phanom Rung, same date, 1930. Okay? This is how it is now, back in a temple. So it was found in 1930. For some time, apparently, it was displayed at the National Museum in Bangkok for some years, before when the Fine Arts Department decided to renovate, reconstruct Phanom Rung, decided to bring it back to the site. Okay? And it's been identified, or I should say misidentified, as showing the birth of the Buddha, which I very much doubt. I don't think this is Queen Maya that we are seeing here. It is certainly a scene of fertility, in my opinion. So this could be a goddess of fertility of some kind. I would speculate, but this is pure speculation, that possibly it refers to the cycle of the birth of Krishna. Okay? So if you know about the story of the birth of Krishna, there is some transfer of the embryos. So perhaps, this is absolutely not certain, but definitely nothing to do with the Buddha, I think. Okay? So this one here, and I speculated that this was the missing part for the pilaster that we have at the Art Institute. And look at the scroll works here. We will see more details in a minute, but I had tried with a Photoshop to see if it would fit nicely, and it certainly seemed to fit very nicely. Okay? From Photoshop reconstruction. Little story. I don't know if some of you are familiar with this Buriram castle in Buriram city. This is a complete modern duplicate of Phanom Rung, miniature size. Okay, so it's not to scale; it's a little smaller, but it's pretty close. And this is the entrance to the main sanctuary. You see the lintel here, and what do we see here? The scene of the birth of Buddha or Krishna. And on the opposite, I was very surprised to see that the artist, or people who created this, as the original is missing, but they have to come up with something here. And they basically reproduce a mirror image. It's pretty smart, but oops, it doesn't work. So unfortunately, this will have to go, and they will have to redo it, I think. So I forgot to mention, but this is the depiction of Krishna, Govardhana. So Lord Krishna uplifting the mountain Govardhana, if you're familiar with the story. Looking closer at the motifs. So this is our pilaster, the base. Look at these scroll works, and what do you see here? You see mythical birds, so goose or swan, amsa. Okay? And this is the fragment in situ, so the top part. And you can clearly see that it's exactly the same. And what is great about it is that this motif is unique to Phanom Rung. You do not see, I've not seen any of it in Angkor or Pimai or elsewhere. Only Phanom Rung. So to many of us, all these Khmer temples look the same to us, but for art historians, we study these little motifs, and there are differences here and there. Okay? And there are some certainly unique features in each temples. So this Amsa is unique to Phanom Rung, and this is a key here to identify the missing part. And finally, what was really missing was the measurements, the dimensions, to be certain that the fragment we have in Chicago match the missing gap in situ. So I went there last year and I measured. This is the measurement for the pilaster. This is approximately the measurement in situ, and it seemed to match perfectly. So it's a match. So when I came back to Chicago earlier this year, in January, went to report, shown all the evidence I found, and this time there was 100% certainty that the fragment we have in Chicago belongs to Phanom Rung. There was no doubt about it, even though there was no visual record of it. I have not been able, despite me going through all these archives, to be able to find the old photos of the pilaster in situ. Just not there, but everything else matched. So shared information with leadership at the museum, etc., and presented the case to the board of trustees eventually. So in America, museums goes through board of trustees who make these decisions, whether to acquire or deaccession certain objects out of the collection. Curators can propose, but eventually it is the trustees who decide, who have the power and the money, certainly, to buy things. So it was presented eventually in June last year, and coming with the decision that we have to deaccession this object on the ground of all the information I have provided to you. And this is when we're starting to, we have, of course, earlier on approached the Thai authorities to check with the Krom Silapakorn if they would agree first to the evidence, and if they would agree to accept the return of this object. And of course, they were delighted. Okay. So this is when we decided to take down the object from view. Now, currently, it is in storage. We have received the visit of the Royal Thai Consul of Chicago to visit the Art Institute and to discuss the case. And we have changed the information on our website to reattribute the object, not from Cambodia, but from Thailand, okay, from Phanom Rung, and to deaccession it. Okay? And this is when the news came out. More recently, in the summer this year, we received a visit of the newly appointed Thai ambassador in the US, in Washington, D.C., came to visit us. And with the hope that whenever the Thai authorities are ready and scheduling the return, we will be able to reunify both the pilaster with the lintel. Okay? That may be challenging, I have to say, structurally speaking, because the temple is already reconstructed, and unless you are taking out the base here to replace with a new stone, I don't see how you could do it. Okay? So it may be perhaps wiser, but I'm no specialist here. In the end, will have to be the decision of the fine arts department to possibly keep this object for some time in a museum and perhaps recarve the missing, the blank stone here in situ. I mean, artists are very able to do this. Okay. Now, I have to say, and this is breaking news, that, like I said earlier, this is not the only missing piece we have at Phanom Rung, and possibly other objects. So if you look at the other side of the north side of the main sanctuary, as you can see here, there are some blanks. Okay? There's certainly a space for lintel here. There's certainly space for some pilasters here. Okay? And this is not 100% certain, but very, very, very likely that, for instance, this lintel may come from Phanom Rung. Okay? We'll have to double check the measurements with the in situ. And similarly, this pilaster, this is all the same. This is an old photograph published in a publication in 1960. This is from the museum website. This is my photograph. It's currently in storage in the Asian Art Museum in San Francisco. That shows the object when it was in Phanom Rung, when it is today. And I'm showing this here because you can see some carvings on the right-hand side here. So this is showing you that this fragment here will have to be located somewhere to the lower right. Okay? And this one, from another museum, would be located to the lower left because of these decorative motifs here to the left. Okay? So I am pretty convinced that these are the missing gaps here, here, and here. Okay? So perhaps more reunification coming soon, we will see. Okay? Thank you. For more on the pilaster, there is a blog article which you can find online with all the details. And I'm hoping to publish a more fully researched report in the GSS sometime in the future. Thank you. There. Any questions, possibly? Discussions, comments?
Thank you so much. It was a really interesting talk. This is a little off the track, but how do you feel as a curator? How much of your...
Not a curator.
Well, okay, your role in the museum. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the fact that all these museums may be giving back more art? There may be nothing left for you to... Just a question, how it works. What are people saying about it?
Well, there is one part of me is very excited, doing this detective work, right? And when you come to a case like this and discovering all your discoverings, it's very excited. And the other side of me say, oh, but I'm actually digging my own grave here, because if, like you said, what do we do? But I think there is so much out there that it'll be amply enough for not just me, but for many of us. It's more than a lifetime work to study all these collections in not just the US, but in many Western museums collections. So I think there's plenty of work there, and we don't have to return everything. There may be absolutely. Let me be clear here that we don't have. Not only we don't have, but there is ground. There is some object that came absolutely legitimately to Western foreign collections, where diplomatic gifts, for instance. Objects we have at the Art Institute of Chicago, Khmer art for more than 100 years. Object that came from very old French collection, okay? Way before the 1970 UNESCO Convention, for instance, which is really a milestone here when we talk about returning, certain objects to the region. So, it's exciting. It's an exciting moment, definitely. And there are not very many specialists as well in this area, so I feel I have a lot of work to do. Yes.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Nicolas. That was really excellent reading on and pinpoint where things may have come from. The female figure and the opposite, if you identify him as being Vishnu, lifting the mountain.
Krishna, yes.
Yeah, Krishna. So can the opposite side be Radha, the female duality? Because that would be Krishna and Radha represent duality between male and female compassion, which is the idea of Hinduism in Krishna type. Okay. So the female is not Queen Maya for sure, but that is Radha. Okay. So that would dictate, that would pinpoint the practice into bhakti worship.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
I think that could be.
Sure, possibly. Yes. I think we have to completely do a rereading of the iconography of Phanom Rung and many other temples.
Yes.
Looking at, I think the Lintel definitely has a connection also to the reclining Vishnu on the serpent. So this is the origins of the world, the universe, as we know.
Yes.
And then there is Krishna coming up. And there are other, Krishna is pretty well represented at Phanom Rung, different miracles of Krishna fighting with, all these demons. Yeah. So you could pretty much read, the life of Krishna at Phanom Rung. Yes.
And another thing is that the U.S. also is not part of the UNESCO. They didn't sign up for that either. So not only Thailand.
I think they signed in 1983. 1983, I think, was the sign.
They haven't signed.
Right.
No,
could double check that.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I was just wondering, you mentioned that dealer in Bangkok, where the piece originated from. You didn't mention the name. Was it established later on who that dealer was?
No, I do not have the name.
Still no.
I'm sure somebody knows.
Yes.
It was not disclosed.
No.
And we don't know the name of the looters. Looters don't leave paper trails, very often. It certainly is a network. We don't have to, pinpoint, one person in particular. It's probably part of a network of peoples, bringing objects. Obviously, this is not the only time, the first time they were doing this, bringing objects down to Bangkok, River City, and then some other. These objects change hands all the time as well, which is often complicating work for people like us. There is many gaps in these stories. But what I want to say is that never mind. Yes, of course, there are gaps, there are things that we don't know still. But the fact is that the object came from the site. We know precisely where it came from, the circumstances around it. So I really advocate for this very proactively that we have to return it. Okay?
Yes.
And we have to be proactive. We cannot just wait for a claim, which will probably never come. Nobody knew, which was sort of amazing to me as well, when we have seen, the evidence. But yeah.
One more question.
Sure.
I'm from the Netherlands, and in the Netherlands, the official government policy is that objects will be returned if the government in question, which is very often Indonesia, asks for it. So
Exactly. And that's very often the official position. Museum will not proactively return anything.
No. Is that also the case here in Thailand? I mean, the Thai government has to actually officially make a request for
Well, that's what I'm
return,
saying.
otherwise they don't return?
Well, there is
that the
no
case?
no rule, but definitely I can tell you by experience that in the U.S., most U.S. museums, which are private museums, okay, most of these museums are private, they will not return something if it's not being asked for, and if there is a claim, then there can be some discussion, negotiations around it. As it happened back in 1988, Thailand came to the Art Institute and said, here's the evidence, we want this object back, please, and take some time. This time around, I really advocate for something else. We know this is coming from there, this is not right, we have to return it proactively, and hopefully, mindset will change around.
Thank you.
But I cannot say that every museum will proactively want to return everything, and you have to do all the research.
Most won't.
It's
won't, actually.
don't realize how much work there is behind all this.
Thank you.
How long did it take for you to come to the? I mean, great detective work, by the way. When you started working at the museum, how long did it take for you to basically figure out that the piece was located in Thailand, and it seems like really fast detective work.
How long?
Yeah, how long did it
Did
take?
it took me to realize?
Yeah.
5 minutes.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
But then you have to do all the work to prove it.
So you kind of had a gut feeling where it was.
So you have to build a case. You have to bring the evidence, the literature, the measurements, all that.
And how long did that take?
So about a year. I mean, like I said, it took most of last year.
Pretty much as soon as you walked in there, you kind of knew where it was from and
no, I mean, I didn't know beforehand.
Yeah.
I didn't know beforehand. And I had to, when I started to work on this object, that I realized, yes. Going through the galleries, no. But like I said, I had a hunch that this could not be coming from Angkor. So I was looking into Northeast Thailand, and I would have found it anyway. Pimai, another famous Khmer temples, has a very similar pilaster base. Not Krishna particularly, but so these are very peculiar to the region.
Great work, very inspiring.
Yeah. I wasn't there back in the 70s or 80s in Chicago, but I've asked around whether these objects were displayed next to each other. That would have been fabulous. It was sort of amazing to me that no one has figured it out before, really. It took that long to realize, but yes.
I have a question. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I have a question about the lintel that you are looking at now to put on the other side of Phanom Rung, the one that has the monkeys on it.
Yeah.
Can you
The
tell
monkey
us
face.
a little bit more about that particular lintel and the meaning and why there?
The iconographic topic, the fight of the monkeys' army, is displayed at Phanom Rung. There is space there, definitely. So that's one thing. The measurements almost certainly fit as well. The stone, I haven't mentioned, but the stone is a peculiar pinkish sandstone, which is again pretty unique to the region. So all these things. I cannot be 100% certain, but very, very likely. And one of the pilasters, definitely, we have visual evidence that it was in Phanom Rung in the 60s, so that's for sure.
So actually, that piece at the Asian Art Museum, the face is new.
And the face is
Yes,
being
the
rebuilt,
face is new,
definitely.
yes.
This is one of the considerations you have to think.
So it's probably from Pimai, though, that piece.
Which one?
The one of the Ramayana one.
You mean the head, the new head, or the lintel? You
The
think
lintel,
it's Pimai?
Yes. That was, many scholars talk about that. When I used to be a curator at the Asian Art Museum of San Francisco, and we debate on that before. So
that's
it could be,
often the thing. The thing is that when we are not 100% certain, what do we do? Is it from here, from there? These are complicated, issues, and unless you are 100% certain, these are not easy decisions to make. And certainly, you can discuss Pimai, Phanom Rung, but what if Thailand, Cambodia, or Vietnam? I mean, there is Khmer art all over the region, not just in Cambodia or just Thailand, okay? So these are very important decisions to make. And perhaps we have to think of a different model when we think of Khmer art, regional arts, of stewardship. We cannot just think of ownership, this belongs to us or to a country, but talking about stewardship, share ownership, that maybe Western museum could collaborate with source countries and find, different agreements to discuss that, we acknowledge that this object came from this place or that place, but we would like to display it and interpret it and continue to show to the world, this beautiful art. I mean, there is definitely, it's a win-win situation as well. So we have to think of different models and not just return everything or keep everything.
Can you say something about the context? This Khmer art became quite fashionable to collect in the 70s and 80s. Was this primarily a demand-driven market? So people, the fascination in the West with old art, or was it more like supply-driven? So somebody tried to push this stuff on the market.
I don't have the absolute answer to that, but I would think for the American market, there was also opportunities. There were just more opportunities in the 70s, 80s, definitely with Cambodia, because of the Civil War or the Vietnam War, So that definitely is a context to be considering. And here we're talking about Thailand. So Thailand has not been colonized, all right? There was no officially a war there, but it was next door. So definitely, the militaries were involved. There were all these, activities around. There were definitely lootings around back in the 60s. The Thai law, I think, for the forbidding of export of antiquities is 1961, I believe. Okay, so it's pretty early, even before the UNESCO convention. But who cares? I mean, the looters definitely don't care about these laws, and they find ways, to smuggle these things out of the country without any problems. Okay, so we have to consider all this.
Okay. I was going to ask about the iconography of the lintel with the monkeys, but I think someone beat me to it. But is there any definite theme for that? That's the first question. And the second one is a comment. I live in Chicago, studied there up until 1989. So I walked past the original lintel from Phanom Rung several times.
You have seen it?
But there wasn't a wing like this. It was an Asian art section. I can't remember which building it was in.
Would you have photographs of that time?
It was a photograph, and my photographs are plenty. There are tons of them. They're not digital like this.
No.
And I don't know where I can find it anymore. And I usually don't take what we call long shot, big view. I usually take
general views.
Maybe one long shot, one object
at
in
a
each photo.
Sure.
It would be better to ask for the photos of the museum.
Well, I checked.
Because cover a section of what they call Southeast Asian, and one section will be Cambodian, even though where they were from, it's Angkorian period.
Sure.
Then all these Angkorian are jumbled together. Then there are a couple of lintels and other carvings. This lintel in particular was basically about that level. You could see it at the eye level, very closely. Instead,
You mean
you'd have to look up.
the lintel
With the
or
Vishnu.
or the
with
pilaster?
the Vishnu, not the pilaster. I don't remember this because we walked past it so many times, and I thought, okay, it's Cambodian because, of course, it's in Korean.
Yeah.
But when the news came about, they removed it from the
From view.
display.
Yeah, sure.
So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah, yeah.
sorry.
No, I have not been able, unfortunately, to find all photographs of the gallery installations at the time. We don't seem to have records of that, unfortunately. So I'm asking around if anyone knows, have all photographs from the 70s, 80s. Please share. Will be very prescient. As for the first question, I think we've tried to answer. It's a debate. So.
So, thank you for the presentation. You mentioned that the pilaster was displayed in the museum with the comment provenance de Cambodia.
Up until recently,
yeah.
yes.
What about the reaction of the Cambodian authority regarding the provenance? Did they react it as?
I'm not aware of official reactions from Cambodian authorities, but I think if you read through all the social medias, Facebook and all that, you will read some reactions there, but not official reactions, but from the community. And some people claim that everything Khmer must be Cambodia. I mean, we can discuss about that, but this is not my problem. I think we have to look beyond the modern borders of, Khmer doesn't mean Cambodia, basically. Okay, I think we have to be clear about that.
Just because of the comment of the information close to the pilaster itself, when it's mentioned coming from Cambodia, it could have raised.
So that's my job now to rewrite all these labels, because everything Khmer has been assumed for people who are non-specialists. Okay, Cambodia, Angkor. Wow. Sorry, no. It's more complicated. And sometimes we just don't know, so we have to, acknowledge Thailand or Cambodia or possibly Vietnam. I mean, we have examples of Khmer art from Vietnam as well, or southern Laos. I mean,
okay.
Yeah. So
thank you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, same with Roman art. It's all over the place. Yeah. Beyond the borders.
Nicolas, could I ask? You mentioned that in the 1980s, when there was the discussion, that the idea was that the Art Institute wouldn't give it back unless they got something.
In compensation.
In compensation. Was that true for this time too?
No.
Okay.
No. Time has changed. Definitely. No. Okay, maybe one last question. I think we should close here. Yeah, at the back.
Thank you. You said that it was up to governments to request, to initiate the return of these things. I mean, what is stopping governments from doing that? Because I would have thought there were, as we know, loads of objects in European, Asian objects in European and American museums.
Politics, diplomacy, and you have to do the work. You have to come with the evidence. You cannot just assume, oh, this belongs to us, we want it back. You have to really make a case. You have to, and museums as well. Everybody has to do some work there. It's not that straightforward. So
but
that's time-consuming. It's a lot of
requests in the pipeline that you know of.
Where? Sorry.
No, sorry. Are there a lot of requests, government requests?
Oh, there must be. Yes, of course, all the time. Sure. Yeah. There is an official list, certainly for Thailand. I mean, Ajahn Pad knows very well. There is a list of certain number of things which may or may not be confidential, but yes, definitely, of course.
Last week, which I also attended, yeah. So there's going to be a lot of lists from many museums in the U.S., not only in the U.S., other countries too, in the West.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have reached a point of no return, that these repatriations, and I have to perhaps make a difference here between simple return, restitution, goes to communities, and repatriation goes to the country. So in this case, it is a repatriation to the Kingdom of Thailand. The Fine Arts Department is part of the Kingdom of Thailand. And sometimes, in some cases, a museum or a Western foreign museum may wish to return an object to a particular community. Okay? And so that is called restitution. So that's the difference between the terms. So perhaps more return in the coming year, we'll see. Thank you very much.
Well, on behalf of the Siam Society, thank you very much, Nicolas. Fascinating talk. Good detective work. Thank you very much.